right, so we are off to the Battle of the Little Bighorn. It's a subject that I've always been interested in. I've lived in Southwest Montana my whole life, and I'm just going to give this a shot, and we're going to see what happens, because I tried to do this in 2018 when I didn't really know much about YouTube. I didn't know much about vlogging, and I ended up getting a drone and this GoPro here. Actually, I got one video on tactical history. The only video on tactical history discovery is that video that I edited on the plane ride home, and that's it. So we're gonna start out. I got the GoPro. I got us a brand new drone because I want to show the battlefield in detail of what I know from a book by James Donovan called A Terrible Glory. It's a book that just really resonated with me because I read it many times over, because it'll put you in the shoes of the 7th Calvary in 1876, and what they went through that day is absolutely fucking insane. So, absolutely insane. So that's why I'm going to make this first episode of Tactical History Discovery about the Battle of the Little Bighorn. So, let's keep on rocking and rolling.
I got involved in it because I think Elon Musk contributed. He talked about it, because a lot of people in the UK, I don't think, know the extent in 2014. And there's been the Casey report, all of which confirmed that this was happening, and the state still continued to try and pretend it was just happening in a small number of siloed areas where you obviously had a...
This was there was architecture to it. This was by design. This was done, or is this just a natural response to people being called racist? Because of course, in the past there was more racism than there is today, and people always want to point to that racism as, evidence of colonialism, evidence of legal immigration that you have in Britain.
It's almost impossible to say how many people are living there illegally, living with us illegally. But in our paper, we think it's sort of 1.8 to 2 million people, probably.
Just to encourage mass migration.
I think it was to encourage this mass immigration and make it very difficult to stop it practically. Interestingly, he's quite crafty, because he came out the other day.
Okay, our room is 209. Where the hell is 209? There it is, 209. The lights not work? There it goes. Okay, here we are. Wow, what is going on? Okay, the lights I think are working. We don't really know, but there it is. All right, looks like we got a little kitchen, got a refrigerator, little place to store food, a microwave, wow. Huh. A freaking stove, that's crazy. I've actually never been in a room like this where you got like a kitchen. Got our bathroom here. Aha, there we go. Got a place to work, sit down and do a little editing. Wow, I got like a freaking whole, this is like a room, like a house room. Cubbies, place to hang your clothes, TV. Okay, here we are, Billings, Montana. Let's see what the view's like. Yeah, seen worse. Okay, so tomorrow we're gonna go down to the Little Bighorn battlefield. You're gonna see the Little Bighorn like you've never seen it before. So that'll be it for today. See you guys in the morning. Guys, we've officially made it to the Little Bighorn battlefield. Just pulling off the exit right now here in a second, and we're gonna head to the first destination of the chronological order of battle of the Battle of the Little Bighorn. So we're gonna do this like, we're not gonna go straight to the Custer's Last Stand Memorial. We're gonna actually be going south of the battlefield so I can show you where, like, the approach of the battle. I want to show chronological order of how the battle unfolded so you can get a better understanding of what happened here. So let's do this. So if you're, most people when they're going to the battlefield, they're taking a left right here, like this guy, but we're taking a right and going down the sketchy res road. It's actually not that sketchy. We're in Crow country. Crows help the white man. That's why you never sing or dance like them. Let's do this. We're heading southbound right now, and we're actually going by the actual Last Stand Memorial. You're not going to be able to see where it is from here, but we're going by it like right now. It's way up there. This is where we're going to start the journey. Down to the bottom right-hand side of the screen, we got the battalion division where Custer would have split his command. In other words, the beginning of the end for the 7th Calvary that day. So that's why I wanted to start down here, because this is the beginning, the true beginning. And it looks like an insignificant place, but in order to picture from start to finish order of battle, I wanted to start here. So without further ado, let's begin. Out here in this seemingly inconspicuous location would be where Custer calls up Marcus Reno and Frederick Benteen. He orders Marcus Reno to chase about 50 head of warriors that they had spotted from the crow's nest or somewhere around there. And so they were heading back towards the Bighorn. So Custer wanted Reno to pursue those 50 warriors, and he wanted Benteen to move down to the south in order to do a recon to make sure that there wasn't more teepees out there, scattered from the main camp, because normally in other cases that Custer had known was the Indians would separate their circles up and down the river. It could be 15 miles could be one Indian camp of just scattered circles, and they did that mainly for sanitary purposes, and it makes sense. And so they had not seen a camp the likes of which they were about to discover. So without knowing that, he sends Benteen to the south, and Benteen's pissed because he thinks it's a pointless scout. He thinks in Benteen's mind, Custer just wants all the glory and blah, blah, blah. And, to me, it makes sense why he did that. But they didn't know what was about to happen. So this area right here is exactly what they would have seen heading into the Little Bighorn battle. From here, we travel downstream, and the next thing we're going to see is where Reno would have actually crossed the Little Bighorn. Here we are. We are at the exact location where Marcus Reno would have taken about 150 of his men, and he would have crossed this bend in the river, this horseshoe-like bend, where according to all the maps, it shows that he crossed in the exact spot of where a big horseshoe-like bend was in the river. So he would have crossed with his men, and Charles Varnum and Frederick Gerard would have come back because they went ahead of him, and they chased those 50 head of warriors out into the prairie, and they saw the camp, or they saw the Indians that were making big circles with their horses and creating a big massive cloud of dust. They come back to Reno and say, hey, these Indians are not going to run away. They're going to stay here, and they're going to fight. Okay, we just saw where Reno and his company would have crossed and do the fateful charge towards about 10,000 teepees, most of which they couldn't see because of the obscurity of dust that the warriors were kicking up by going round and round and round in circles, obscuring the view of the soldiers as they approached. So let's go check it out. Let's go see where that charge took place. Reno's 3 companies are riding in line of 4 up the valley. Reno orders G Company to move to his right flank. At this time, the company is moving at a gallop in line of battle. M on the left, A in the middle, and G on the right. Ahead was about 50 head of Indians they had been chasing for more than a half an hour. They were seen galloping back and forth, to and fro, raising a massive cloud of dust behind which little could be seen. Beyond them in the distance were other Indians, and the closer the soldiers approached, the more Indians they could see. When the line of battle reaches Gary Owen, from Reno's view on the left side of the line, he gets first sight of the large camp. The view is still obscured from the dust cloud and the wooded bend, but Reno could see about 400 teepees in several large circles
and coming forth in increasing numbers were hundreds of painted, screaming warriors, most of them naked save for a small breechcloth. Reno calls out, "Battalion, halt, prepare to fight on foot, dismount." It was not quite 3:30 p.m. A few uncontrollable M Troop horses continued to gallop down the valley towards the hostile line despite the inexperienced riders' frenzied attempts to stop. Two privates, James Turley and George Smith, galloped straight ahead and into the dust cloud. They were never seen again. Another private, Roman Rutten, managed to steer his steed to the right in a wide circle into the timber and into safety, while a fourth went into the dust cloud and somehow managed to shoot his way back out. The rest of the line dismounts and forms an interval, keeping distance among one another. Every fourth trooper connected all the mounts to a bridle snap ring and led the horses into the wooded timber just behind the wooded bend. Left on the thin blue line were 150 troopers spread 250 yards across the valley from the wooded bend. The troopers start walking down the valley about 100 yards, shooting feverishly at hundreds of Indians. Then the order came to stop. Soldiers promptly knelt or lay prone, using a prairie dog town as breastworks. Officers stayed standing and pacing behind the soldiers, giving words of advice to stay calm and aim low. Indians at this time are making bravery runs, where the warriors would gallop close to the troop lines and shoot from under the horse's neck, bolstering morale for the other Indians who would follow suit, getting bolder and bolder. Close to the wooded bend, Lakotas move up and trade furious fire with the soldiers in the wooded bend, G Company. Meanwhile, the Lakota line is gaining more and more warriors pouring out of the camp, extending the line to the west and around Reno's M Company on the prairie. The order came for M Company to fall back and reform the line facing west, using the dry ravine. Spirits are still high in the dry ravine, men talking and laughing and confident of victory. But over the next 15 minutes, hundreds of warriors, said to be an additional 400 to 500, descend on M Company's western-facing flank in the dry ravine. At least 200 get around the left of the west-facing flank and to the rear of the battalion. Reno calls out to M Company, "Retreat to your horses, men," without arranging a rearguard action. Reno rushes back into the trees and takes a big swig of whiskey. Panicked soldiers begin to rush out of the dry ravine toward the trees. Captain French quickly ordered, "Steady, men. I will shoot the first man who turns his back on the enemy. Fall back slowly. Keep up continual fire, you damn fools." The men then retreat slowly and steadily. The new line is formed. It's said that behind them, there was an open glade where the horses were held. It was a continuous roar of gunfire, one trooper remembered. More and more warriors continued adding to the fight, perhaps 1,000, surrounding the small wooded timber sheltering the bluecoats. Confusion and lack of communication took hold. Reno continued directing fire for the men of G Company toward the amassing number of Indians. All the officers could see, through the timber and smoke, was the top of the bluffs. Ammo was running out quickly, and they were quickly being surrounded by an ever-growing number of Indians. If they didn't leave now, there would be no leaving at all. Only the men within earshot or lucky enough to receive the order to retreat passed by mouth knew of Reno's call to retreat. Near pandemonium reigned as troopers yelled the names of their number 4 men with their horses, with Indian bullets zipping among them, accompanied by high-pitched war cries and eagle-bone whistles. Reno asks Moylan where he thinks they should go. Moylan points to the bluffs. Moments later, a huge volley of rifle fire from the Indians hits Bloody Knife in the head and explodes his brains and blood all over Reno's face. Reno then panics, mounts his horse and yells, "Any of you men who wish to escape, draw your revolvers and follow me," then leaves those who were not mounted to fend for themselves, disappearing in the thick gunsmoke. All 3 companies would make their escape to the bluffs, being pursued and chased like a buffalo hunt by over 1,000 Indians. Okay, so Reno is ahead of everybody, of course, and his 3 companies are frantically retreating up these bluffs across the river here. And right here is a pretty famous grave. It's the grave of Benny Hodgson. And Benny Hodgson was Reno's adjutant. So probably one of Reno's only friends in this expedition. And Benny Hodgson doesn't have a horse, and he's trying to get across the river. And as he's going through the river, he gets shot through both legs. And he's bleeding out in the river, shot in both legs. He can't move. He can only hold his head above water. Men are running over the top of him, horseback and on foot. And he finally yells out to a guy crossing the river, "For God's sakes, pick me up. I'm shot through both legs. I don't want to die here." So the guy stops his horse, and Benny grabs a hold of his stirrup, and they try to get up that bluff, that steep bluff you see right there, because men are trying to get over that with their horses while they're being shot at by about 3,000 Indians. And Benny finally grabs a hold of the stirrup, and as they're coming up out of the water, Benny's shot through the head. And that's where he lay. That's where he fell off, let go of the stirrup, while everybody was frantically running up that steep draw there. So we're running up the steep draw, frantic chaos. And like the Indians would say later, it resembled a buffalo chase. So Indians are up on both sides of these ridges here, shooting down into the Bluecoats, both on horseback and on foot. And it's just a complete disaster. Reno's already at the top, of course, but whoever is making it up to the top is able to shoot down at the Indians that are getting closer and closer. And I think that's probably what helps kind of ward off the chase, because the Indians eventually turn around and head back up the valley, or down the valley, towards Custer. And here we get to the Benteen Reno Monument. So Benteen is now coming up with his company straight ahead out in the distance. He's making his way to meet Reno, where Reno's frantically screaming and crying about what happened. And here we have an Indian grave right here, a warrior grave. That's clear down from the siege location, because they were under siege up there, Reno and Benteen, and all of their men, for the rest of the day, June 25th, all day the 26th, and then into the 27th, where, well, the 26th is when they watched all the Indians leave the valley from right there. They would look out and they watched them. And then Alfred Terry and his company, his battalion, shows up and rescues them on the 27th.
Okay, here we go, guys. We're going to do the beginning of the part 2 here at Benteen and Reno's siege, basically. So what we got right here, from here, all of these draws, I mean, all of this whole region was full of troops and Indians chasing them. So a lot of men didn't make it up here. A lot of them died down at the bottom. And down at the bottom there, when they got up to this spot right here, they could see old men and women mutilating the bodies of the dead and the wounded down in the bottom there. So they came up to this monument right here, and all along where this sidewalk is going is going to the sidewalk here is going to take us around the perimeter of all the soldiers that would be up here and waiting for the rescue, while being attacked for about 2 or 3 days, I believe, is how long they were up in this swale. So in fact, when it comes to the Little Bighorn, this area to me here is the more interesting part of the battle, because a lot happened here between the commanders talking about what they were going to do, because they had lost sight of Custer up here. Benteen was still on his way up after he went on that big meaningless scout, and Reno goes and does that big charge, gets beat bad, and comes all the way back up here. And Benteen hadn't shown up yet. They had to sit up here for a while before Benteen arrived with his company. So nobody's seen Custer. They don't have any orders. There's no relay messenger coming back to Reno and his companies to give an order. But you have to remember, and you have to think of the reality of how the commanders were together, Custer, Reno, Benteen, and so forth, what they were like with each other before the battle even started. They had a lot of contempt for each other. They didn't respect each other. There was a lot of drama going on prior to the day of the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Reno is completely inebriated by the time he gets up here. He's lost command. He's not really in charge. He's drunk, shocked, and Frederick Benteen then arrives. But the pack train hasn't arrived yet. The pack train with all the food and ammo and everything else is still behind because they're slow. They're packed down, it's just mules. And so by the time Reno and Benteen meet down here, all the warriors that originally chased Reno up here, Frederick Benteen gets here with his company. They watch the Indians that chased him up here running down the valley, heading downriver to the north. Meanwhile, while this is happening, see, this is when Custer is engaging. This is when the last stand is actually happening. It's happening simultaneously with Custer's two other divisions down here. Custer is engaging hotly. From here, they're hearing gunfire, roars of gunfire from right down here, and that's when Reno and Benteen are sitting down here for nearly a half an hour, hearing nothing but roars of gunfire on the north end of the battlefield. So well, we flew down there, but it didn't say Isaiah Dorman's name on the grave. So it might be the wrong one, but Isaiah Dorman was the only black man that was on the expedition with the 7th Calvary. He was actually a civilian interpreter. So he was married to a Hunkpapa woman. I can't remember her name, but so he could speak the language. And so he was a part of the 7th Cavalry's journey to the Little Bighorn and went in with Reno, but he never came back out. They say that he went down there along the trees somewhere in the retreat, and when he went down, he was shooting back towards the Indians that were chasing him, and he shot one through the heart, but then him and his horse went down because his horse had too many bullet holes in him. So Isaiah Dorman goes down, and there's other members of other soldiers from the U.S. 7th Cavalry that are passing by him, and he waves goodbye and yells goodbye to those retreating other commanders. And that's where Isaiah Dorman was finished off, was somewhere down there. But he got shot, and while he was dying basically next to his horse, Sitting Bull himself actually comes around with a group of other warriors, and Isaiah kind of knew these people from helping them out at the agencies before the Little Bighorn. And Sitting Bull comes around with the warriors, and then as Isaiah is sitting there, bleeding out, he asks Sitting Bull, please don't finish me off. I'm already dying. Don't count coup on me. So counting coup means touch the enemy before you kill them. And that was a warrior custom. And so he kind of begs and pleads, don't kill me. I'm already dying. Don't count coup on me. And Sitting Bull immediately says, don't kill that man. He gave me food at the reservation at the agency. So the warriors obviously oblige and listen to Sitting Bull. They all hop on their horses and then head up towards Reno. And then a woman comes around the corner, and her 10-year-old little brother had been killed that morning. So she was really pissed off and not in a merciful mood. Isaiah's bleeding out down there, and he says, please don't kill me. I'm already going to die. You know, you don't need to finish me off. She says to him, and I think her name was Eagle Robe, she says, well, if you didn't want to come here, if you didn't want to die, then maybe you shouldn't have come here. And she draws a pistol and shoots him in the head. And that was the end of Isaiah Dorman. And then she kept going, I guess, towards the other wounded soldiers down there and dispatched them with a sheath knife. So.
Some of the mounted Washichus escaped their pursuers, but most of them were brought down before getting too far, shot or chopped or bludgeoned. One officer on a powerful horse galloped through the dark clouds of dust and gray gunpowder and headed west over hills and down ridges for a mile or more. Several warriors on ponies chased him, but eventually they gave up one by one. The last man had just reined in his horse and was about to turn around when he saw the soldier shoot himself in the head with his pistol and pitch from his mount. The warrior rode up and counted coup on the...
All right. So now we've gone from Benteen and Reno's siege location. We're heading towards Custer's last stand. So I guess Custer, according to the park, says that he actually ended up getting to the top of this ridge right here and actually seeing first sight of the camp, and he was watching and then he watched Reno do the big charge. And from down there, they saw Custer up on this ridge, and that was the last they saw of him, because then he rides with his 6 companies down this coulee called Cedar Coulee or whatever. So he rides down there and then around to go to his demise.
So now we know that this is where Custer would have rode up with his 5 companies, not 6, and he would have gotten first glance of the camp. But I want to say that he was actually watching Reno charge the camp initially down where Benteen and Reno's siege location is. That to me would make more sense, because you could actually... There was accounts of where guys said that they could see him up there waving his hat. And from the ridge that we're looking at now, I don't see how the men down in the valley charging the big camp under Reno could have seen Custer clear up there waving his hat and knew about it, but whatever. We do know by fact that this is where Custer would have been looking over the battlefield, and he would have seen Reno hotly engaged down in the bottom where we've already been, down at Gary Owen. And so Custer then, with the idea of flanking the camp, kind of doing like a pincer move, he takes off from the ridge and goes down Cedar Coulee, down this coulee, and then he wraps around to the west with his command, and we'll go from there next. But this is kind of a big spot where we know Custer would have rode in this exact area with his 5 companies. Would have been a busy day that day, June 25th, 1876.
After Custer and his command go from seeing the village for the first time, they descend into that Cedar Coulee. They come around out of the Cedar Coulee and down into what's called Medicine Tail Coulee. And it's up here, somewhere up here, is where Custer then divides his company again and tells George Yates to come down here and Miles Keogh go up and ascend up closer towards the last stand. Custer comes down and he's met with the first real close-up sight of the massive Indian village Indian encampment. So we'll go see that here next. So at this time, we've come out of the Cedar Coulee and we're going out into this open plain area, headed west towards the Medicine Tail Ford. Custer and his 5 companies are going to move from the left of the screen to the right up onto the foothills before he actually gives his guys the order. So they get up to the foothills on the side, to the right-hand side of the screen, and Custer draws up Miles Keogh and George Yates, who are going to be responsible for the companies. So George Yates gets 2 companies and Miles Keogh gets 3, because Miles Keogh was a superior officer to Yates. So he orders Yates to take his 2 companies and go down to the ford, the Medicine Tail Ford, and basically try to draw the Indians from the camp in order, in his mind, to distract them from Reno. But Custer doesn't even realize, because there's no communication, they're all split up, that the Reno fight has already happened by the time they get to this position. And those 3,000 warriors that chased Reno up into the bluffs are now amassing behind the other couple thousand that are amassing on the river, looking across at Custer and his 5 companies. So George Yates gets down to the river. They get set up and they start firing on the camp, because the camp is like right there. And this is the first Custer really can see the full extent of the situation, and they're very close. And there's just Indians amassing on the other side of the river and trying to cross the river, and George Yates has 2 companies down there trying to hold them off. Custer and Miles Keogh are up higher observing, and they're also waiting for Benteen to show up with his companies and the pack train. So Custer's looking down at Yates. Yates's 2 companies are getting hammered down by the river, and Custer notices there's like 50 or so warriors that are coming up around to his north out in the open. So he has one of the companies shoot at him, and they scatter. At this time, Custer's realizing that he could get surrounded up there, as these Indians are just amassing over across the river and coming right for him. So he orders everybody up with him to fire a volley round to signal Yates to retreat and come meet them up there on the high place at the rendezvous point. It's been so Yates pulls back. They're taking casualties. Lieutenant Jack Sturgis, son of Samuel Sturgis, gets killed down there by the river. So Custer has lost a very important kid in the political world. It's getting bad quickly at this time. Yates gets up to Custer with the remainder of his 2 companies, lots of casualties down there by the river, and Custer can wait for Benteen no longer. He's still nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, he is with Reno, and they are on the south end of the battlefield, twiddling their thumbs. George Yates and his 2 companies then reach Custer up at the rendezvous point. Yates reports casualties, and there are more Indians encroaching from the east and the south. They have gone through where Yates was down at the Medicine Tail Ford, and the situation is getting very, very busy. Custer then orders George Yates and his 2 companies to follow him over the long ridge towards what is now Last Stand Hill, in order to try to get around the big village and try to pull one last offensive maneuver to get some sort of control over the situation. And he has Miles Keogh stay at the rendezvous point with his 3 companies deployed so they can cover Custer and Yates's rear and provide a beacon for if Benteen were to come over the hill towards the south and see all the action.
So Keogh stays put. George Custer, his administration, kind of his staff, George Yates and his two companies move out from the rendezvous point and head down the long ridge to the north and around to try to get down to the river and pull some sort of miracle here. As they're trotting across the long ridge, Indians are encroaching from all over. They're shooting arrows at them and bullets. Men are falling. It's not quite horrible, but it is almost at max rev RPM. It's almost in the red at this point. Custer then gets around the long ridge with everybody, and they make it all the way down. They go down through the cemetery, the current day cemetery at the Little Bighorn, and get all the way down to the river where they're trying to make a move, but there are too many Indians down there. The ridge that they just came from, up by the cemetery, Indians were seen where they had just been, shooting arrows and bullets at them. The hornet's nest is slowly coming to grips. So Custer turns his command around and heads back up through the cemetery, the current day cemetery, and up to Last Stand Hill. It's at this time where Miles Keogh, Jimmy Calhoun, Tom Custer, and all their companies are being simultaneously wiped out where Custer had them hold at the rendezvous point. He's watching this. He's looking around. The grip is getting tighter and tighter there at the Last Stand Hill. George Custer then orders everybody off their horse, and he orders them to shoot their horses. A very stark declaration of the magnitude of the situation. They shoot their horses. They use them as breastworks, something to be sheltered behind, while thousands of Indians pour around their position. And Miles Keogh and Jimmy Calhoun's companies, they are trying to get to where Custer is at the last stand. And it is there where, and all that ridge there is where it all goes down. Custer is shot in the chest. He goes down. He draws his 2 bulldog pistols and starts firing and is shot in the head eventually. He gets shot through the temple and is killed instantly, along with everybody else.